Hi everyone, and welcome on another one of our virtual Yellowstone tours. Today I'm at the Tower-Roosevelt area. Straight ahead of me is the road that leads from Tower, where we are now of course, over Dunraven Pass towards Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, and unfortunately that road is closed for 2 years, which creates quite a few problems, as you might imagine, in the park. Today's virtual Yellowstone tour is between Tower Junction and Yellowstone's northeast entrance. In order to see exactly where we are and where we're going, please go and take a look at a map of the park at the following one of our sites, yellowstonetours.net/map. That's yellowstonetours.net/map, and I'm going to drop a map of the park in over here. It looks like there's a buffalo in the road ahead of us. You never know when you're going to come across buffalo in Yellowstone, and the area that we're going towards at the moment is full of buffalo. It's really known for its wildlife. This is the Yellowstone River, and it is coming out of the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone area, which is up in that direction over there. I'll talk more about that though. Why don't we just enjoy the sight of this big old buffalo right next to us. I know that I'm very predictable and I tell these stories over and over again, but the reason that we have buffalo jams in Yellowstone, look at its coat, look at those flies on that buffalo, and here's a buffalo jam developing already just from one buffalo. I've mentioned before that buffalo look really dumb, but there's two aspects of their lives where they're not that dumb. They know that it's a lot easier to walk along this paved road than to try and make their way through the forests. Hence all the buffalo jams that you run into in Yellowstone. And the other area that they're not so dumb, and maybe I'll talk about that later if I have time, is that they know that in the winters, if they migrate to the lower areas of the park, it's going to be warmer and there may be less snow, and the reverse in the summer. If they migrate towards, what is this guy looking at over here? I've often seen grizzly bears in this area. Or maybe he's just stopped to have a cigarette. They know that in the summers, if they go down if they migrate to the higher parts of Yellowstone, it will be a little cooler. This is why in the summer we don't see as many buffalo in the Madison Valley area as you do in the early spring and the fall and the winters, because it's one of the lower areas of the park and the buffalo have migrated elsewhere. To get back to the map that I mentioned to you, if you take a look, you'll see that the roads through the park make up a gigantic figure of 8. And tour companies like ours generally divide their tours into a tour of the lower loop of the figure of 8 and a tour of the upper loop of the figure of 8. And at the moment we are on the upper loop of the figure of 8. Yes, we're on the upper loop of the figure of 8. If you take a look at the very top where you see Gardner, the small town of Gardner, which is just outside the park, and you drop down a little, you'll get to Mammoth, and then if you go to the right or to the east and then down to the south just a little, you will come across the road that runs between Mammoth and Tower Junction, and we have just left Tower and we're making our way to Yellowstone's northeast entrance. Yellowstone, as you probably know by now, has got 5 entrances. There's the north entrance, there's the northeast entrance, and the west entrance, and those 3 are in the state of Montana. Then you've got the road that comes in from Cody, and you'll eventually get to the east entrance. And down south, if you come in from Jackson Hole and then Grand Teton National Park over the Rockefeller Parkway, you'll come in through Yellowstone's south entrance. Most of Yellowstone's roads are closed in the winter months. This here is one of the few roads that stay open, and you may be wondering, right, why? Because we're in the middle of nowhere. And you always wonder why people stop if they've hopefully seen a bear. But there are a lot of buffalo in this area, and I would expect to see herds of them before we get to the northeast entrance. I was mentioning that this road is one of the few roads in the park that stays open on a year-round basis. Right at the end of this road, just outside the northeast entrance, you'll come across the small communities of Silvergate and Cooke City, and they really are tiny. Silvergate is literally just a blink of the eye, and Cooke City is not that much bigger. And there's another buffalo. Where you see that fenced area, I hope you can see it, that's what the Park Service regards as a control area. They'll fence areas off, and they'll fence them off in different ways. And by the type of fencing that they use and the way that the fencing is set up, different types of animals are able to get into that area. So perhaps some fences will keep out only the larger species. Other fences will keep out not only the buffalo and the elk, but perhaps the coyote and the pronghorn as well. And the authorities, the scientists, can then see how the fenced-off areas react to a lack of wildlife going into that specific area. I was talking about Cooke City and Silvergate and them being really small communities. You can drive through Cooke City, or I don't know, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, depending on how fast you drive. It's literally perhaps 150 yards long. Anyway, the folks who live in Cooke City in the winter months are not able to get out of Cooke City any other way than driving through the park. They take this road from the east, which is ahead of us, to the west, and then they'll turn right at Tower Junction, make their way up towards Mammoth, and then from Mammoth they'll leave the park at the small town of Gardner. And that is really the only way they have to get out of their tiny towns, because and I think we may stop here. Those folks are looking at buffalo, which you can see off at the distance, but we're going to see tons of buffalo. If it were a bear or a wolf or a wolf pack, then we would certainly have stopped. And there's a buffalo doing its business. And another small herd in the background. You're always assured of seeing buffalo in the Lamar Valley. So I was saying, if the people in Cooke City and Silvergate want to go to a market, if they want to get services, if they want to see a doctor in the winter months, this is the road that they have to take to get out of the park. And as you can see when you take a look at that map at yellowstonetours.net/map, it's a long way to go, because once you get to Gardner itself is a very small community, and from there you'll probably have to drive to Bozeman to get, for the most part, what you need. And the reason for that is the roads on the other side of Cooke City, on the northeast side, it's called the Beartooth Highway, and the Beartooth Highway is closed during the winter months because of the amount of snow. And when I talk about snow, the snow there is measured not in feet, but in yards or meters. I mean, there is a huge amount of snow, a significant amount of snow. So the Beartooth Highway is closed, so you can't get out to go to either Red Lodge if you were head up a little to the north, or to the southeast. You can't get down to Cody, Wyoming, and that's why this road is kept open on a year-round basis. I Up ahead of us, we'll be crossing the Lamar River for the first time. The Lamar River is contained entirely within Yellowstone National Park. It's about 40 miles long, which is approximately 64 kilometers long, and it is a tributary of the Yellowstone River. The Lamar River has its headwaters in the Absaroka Mountains, and the Absaroka Range is to be found in the northeast portion of Yellowstone. So we're going to be seeing it, or portions of it, when we get to the northeast entrance. Prior to a geological survey of the park in the mid-1980s, the Lamar was actually known as the East Fork of the Yellowstone River. But during that survey, one of the main geologists, a guy by the name of Arnold Haid, named the river for the guy who was then the Secretary of the Interior. His last name was Lamar. His first three names are just unpronounceable, so please don't expect me to say them. And since then, this has been called the Lamar River. Up ahead of us is Slough Creek. Slough Creek, off in that direction over there, apart from being a very beautiful part of the park, in the spring it is regarded as having some of the best fly fishing in the entire world. The fishing here is just unbelievable throughout Yellowstone, throughout the entire region, in fact. And I'm going to pull over for a moment to give this guy an opportunity to pull ahead of us. And continuing from where I left off, I was talking about Slough Creek, and I mentioned that apart from it being an incredibly beautiful part of the park, it's known for its fly fishing, and it's also known for its wolves, and I'll be talking a lot more about wolves as we go through the Lamar Valley. But Slough Creek is one of the areas that keen wolf watchers will come to, particularly in the spring, because there has been a wolf's den there for the last, goodness, I don't know how many years. So it's a popular place to hang out and try and spot a wolf coming out with her pups in the spring months. We're following the Lamar River off to our right, and in a moment we're going to get to an area where we get out of these small hills, and the Lamar Valley will open up ahead of us. Just like Slough Creek, so the Lamar River itself is a very popular location to go fly fishing, and we often see fishermen here. But the most popular activity in the Lamar Valley is wolf watching. When Yellowstone was founded way back in 1872, there were wolves in Yellowstone, but in those days wolves were regarded as a nuisance. They were regarded as being wanton destroyers of everything that they came across. So they were killed pretty mercilessly, and until the end of 1994 there were no known wolves in Yellowstone. Every now and again there was evidence of, and there's the Lamar down there, you can see a couple of guys fishing. There was no known evidence of wolf packs permanently in the Yellowstone area, although occasionally there was evidence of wolves passing through the region. After a long period of study and much debate and much resistance from the ranchers, or fishermen, from the ranchers of Montana and Wyoming, and the politicians and farmers there, it was decided to reintroduce wolves into Yellowstone. And we've just entered, incidentally, the Lamar Valley. I don't know if you can see the Bison bison off there in the distance. This really is a stunning part of the park. You've got these open fields and then portions of the Absorka Range behind us. We wish that people would use pull-outs properly. And there's some folks down there enjoying the relatively warm weather. It's actually 87 degrees here today in the third week of July. Anyway, I was talking about wolves. So at the end of 1994, and then again in 1995 and 1996, wolves were reintroduced into Yellowstone. They were captured up in Canada and then brought down here to Yellowstone. They were kept in pens, closely guarded by Yellowstone law enforcement rangers, and then they were released into the park. And as I touched on previously, this caused quite some controversy. It really was a political hot potato, and for that matter, it still is. One of the big industries, you see all those people. Normally when you see that number of people in the park, it's because a wolf has been seen. Having said that, I doubt very much if there is a wolf there, because you can see how stationary the buffalo are. If there were wolves or one of the wolf packs, it's likely that the buffalo wouldn't be anywhere near as relaxed as they are at the moment, just peacefully grazing in the Lamar Valley. But if you do come through this area and you see cars on the side of the road, and you see guys with long lenses on their cameras and telescopes, you know that there's a decent chance of wolves in the area. Those of you who've watched several of these virtual Yellowstone tours will know that I like to tell the story about how we'll bring our tours here, and we'll get up here from West Yellowstone somewhere around, say, between 11 and 12 o'clock, and you'll see people in these pullouts, and they'll be sitting with their long lenses once again, staring off into the distance on the other side of the Lamar River there. And you'll go up to them and say, "Hey, what do you guys see? What are you looking at?" And they'll say, "Oh, well, Bob over here saw a wolf." And you'll think tremendous. It's an opportunity for our tour guests to see wolves. And then you ask, "When did you see it?" "Oh, we saw it at 6 a.m. So they saw it 5 or 6 hours ago, and yet they're still there hoping that it's going to appear. And this is something that you see all the time in the Lamar Valley. Talking about the reintroduction of wolves, and I'll get back to that in a minute. I'm going to stop at this pullout, and always try and stop in a pullout if you can. Up ahead of us is Forever Yellowstone, which used to be the Yellowstone Association and the Yellowstone Institute. They merged to form Forever Yellowstone, which is a body that supports Yellowstone's endeavors. That's what those buildings are over there, as well as the Lamar Ranger Station. I was talking about wolves being a political hot potato. As you might imagine, farmers and ranchers and politicians outside Yellowstone weren't exactly thrilled by the idea of Yellowstone reintroducing wolves, because obviously animals, as I've pointed out before, don't know where the park boundaries are. You're not allowed to kill or hunt or shoot animals within Yellowstone. That should go without saying. Having said that, a really well-known wolf, strange as that may sound, a white wolf, an alpha female wolf, was actually poached and killed within Yellowstone a few years ago. At the time of this video, that white wolf's daughter is the alpha female of the Waipiti pack, which you can see in the Hayden Valley, and I'll try and drop in some video that I shot of her a couple of months ago in the Hayden Valley. Anyway, I was saying that animals do not know where the park boundaries are, of course. So the concern of politicians and whatnot in Montana and Wyoming is that wolves were going to stray out of the park and kill the domestic cattle herd, kill sheep, and generally wreak havoc on farming enterprises. So wolves then were reintroduced in the end of 1994, 95, and again in 1996. And there wasn't that much evidence of wolves destroying the domestic cattle herd or sheep, but there's no question that some were killed, and enough to have farmers up in arms. However, the main problem with wolves, certainly at the time that they were reintroduced, and people are stopping for this buffalo herd, the main problem at the time that they were reintroduced is that wolves like to eat ungulates, and elk, of course, are the predominant ungulate in Yellowstone. And the concern was, with elk being a multi-million-dollar industry, particularly in the state of Wyoming. I don't know if you can see that little buffalo. It was obviously born this year. When they come out, they're called red dogs. There's quite a few of them. Obviously, they've lost their red color now. There's another one, probably close to its mom. But can you see that one over there? Still has a little bit of the red hue to it. We have a complete video, although a short one, on the red dogs of Yellowstone. I came across some at the Nez Perce Creek, and you can find it in our virtual Yellowstone tour series. I was talking though about wolves and the effect that they may have on elk, because they love to eat elk. And elk hunting is a multi-million-dollar business in the state of Wyoming. I don't think I mentioned it on this video, but 97% of the park, 97% of Yellowstone is in Wyoming. So it stands to reason that people were concerned that the elk herd roaming outside the park could be decimated by wolves leaving Yellowstone. And with wolves at that time being a protected species in terms of the Endangered Species Act, you weren't allowed to kill wolves except in certain rare circumstances, even when they were outside the park. If we have a look to our left here, we can see another one of those control areas that I mentioned to you before. You can see where those young trees have been fenced in. And notice how there are trees in that area there behind the fences, and you don't see them elsewhere in this area. So the question then became what to do with wolves. Initially, when they were introduced, somewhere around 2015, it's believed that there were approximately 530 wolves in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. When I say the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, I don't mean just the Yellowstone area, but the region around Yellowstone as well. Within Yellowstone in recent years, The wolf population has varied probably from about 90 to about 110, and that is a lot lower than it used to be. I think that the latest figures that I saw were that there were 97 wolves, at least 97 wolves in the Yellowstone in Yellowstone Park. This here is Soda Butte Creek, as you may have seen from that sign, and this is where Soda Butte Creek flows into the Lamar River, which itself flows into the Yellowstone River. So there aren't as many wolves as you may think. Now, also, which may go against your suspicions, most wolves are not killed by man. Wolves tend to kill themselves. They can be very aggressive, and different packs will kill wolves from other packs. And if I remember correctly, some of the sub-alpha females of, I think it was the Druid pack, killed the alpha female of their own pack and various other wolves from that pack. So a lot of the wolf killing is by other wolves. The other main element that kills wolves, and coming up over here behind those beacons, is a really popular area to go horseback riding. You'll find outfitters leave their trailers here. You can see a Park Service one as well. And you can go horseback riding into the park. That's one of several areas. The other really popular one is up at Swan Lake Flats, which you'll come to before you drop down into the Mammoth Hot Springs area. I was talking about wolves. That is Soda Butte Creek again. I was talking about wolves, and the other thing that kills so many of them is canine distemper. They are very susceptible to illnesses that are very similar to those that kill dogs. And with Yellowstone being as large as it is, you would expect there to be a lot more wolves in this area than there actually are. I mean, 97 wolves in all of Yellowstone, buffalo. 97 wolves in all of Yellowstone, with Yellowstone being as huge as it is not very many wolves at all. When scientists perhaps consider whether or not there should be wolves in the Yellowstone ecosystem, what they looked at was a larger picture than just whether wolves kill elk, which was the concern of ranchers and politicians in Wyoming and in Montana. This coming up over here is Soda Butte, from which Soda Butte Creek gets its name. This is a deposit of travertine calcium carbonate, which was formed over 100 years ago by a hot spring that used to be in that area. I'll get back to that in a minute. Isn't that just a beautiful area ahead of us? So those are the Absorta Mountains that I mentioned before coming into view. You've got the Soda Butte Creek River, and you've got the Lamar River back over there. You've got these lush open fields, you've got the forests, you've got the towering mountains. This really is a stunning part of Yellowstone, and the closer you get to the northeast entrance, and for that matter, the closer you get to the east entrance, the more stunning the scenery becomes. I was talking about Soda Butte and how it's formed out of travertine calcium carbonate. I've mentioned elsewhere in other of these virtual Yellowstone tours. I'm going to stop and get a picture here. We'll get some video of the scenery. I was talking about the travertine that makes up Soda Butte. And for those of you who've seen any of the virtual Yellowstone tours about the Mammoth Hot Springs area, I've mentioned how that is the most dynamic part of Yellowstone, because you've got the travertine coming up, being brought up by the thermal water at the rate of about 1 inch to 2 inches every week, whereas down in the southern part of the park, where most of the thermal features are to be found, the main mineral that comes up is called sinter, and that's only coming up at the rate of 1 to 2 inches every 100 years. So the travertine is being produced at a significantly higher rate in the northern part of the park at Mammoth Hot Springs than the sinter is down further south. So Soda Butte is comprised of travertine, as well, of course, as the calcium carbonate that I mentioned. If you take a look again at the park map and you look at where the caldera line is, that soft purple line that follows the lower loop, we see that most of the thermal features are to be found in Yellowstone's southern area. It is a little unusual, but not unheard of, for us to come across a thermal feature here. But as I've pointed out many times, expect the unexpected in Yellowstone. You never know what you're going to see. This stretch of road now has some great hikes on it. This is the Trout Lake hike coming up on the left. If you do intend getting into the backcountry, always carry bear spray with you. Generally speaking, in the Yellowstone area, groups of 6 or more, there's not been a recorded incident of a bear attack on groups of 6 or more, but the fewer the people, the greater the chance there is of a bear attack. So everybody in the group should have bear spray with them and know how to use it. When I mountain bike, look at that, that's pretty delightful, isn't it? When I go mountain biking in the areas outside Yellowstone, but still part of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, I always carry bear spray with me, and have for the last 3 years, because for various reasons there is a much greater incidence of bear attacks, not only in our region but up in Glacier, near Glacier as well. There are so many more times that grizzly bears particularly are coming into contact with people, which has resulted in not only people being killed by grizzly bears, but also being maimed, and then the bears, for the most part, are put down. I told you about the mountains here. They really are spectacular as we get closer and closer to the northeast entrance. Pebble Creek is another smaller river that flows into the Lamar River. I mentioned before how we're outside Yellowstone's main thermal area now, and we're not going to come across any thermal features, just a lot of really beautiful scenery, and there's not going to be that much more for me to talk about, but as and when I come across something of interest, I'll carry on with the narration. In the meanwhile, enjoy the scenery. has clouded up a little bit. The forecast today was for mainly clear skies, but ever since we got on this road at Tower Junction, it's been pretty cloudy, hasn't it? And with me being based, well, having said that, look at how it's cleared up a little. With me being based in West Yellowstone, and with Dunraven Pass being closed, it's always a bit of a challenge to get up here with buffalo jams and stopping for points of interest and wildlife that you see on the road. It's generally about a 2.25 hour drive from West Yellowstone up to the start of this road up to Tower. Beartooth Creek again. You can't blame people for driving slowly in a national park, especially over here where the scenery is just so stunningly beautiful. Enjoyed this mountain view after these trees. See the lines in those rocks towards the top. We see that all over Yellowstone. Perhaps the best example of it is approaching Tower Falls from the north, where you see that very brittle rock on the right hand side, on the west side of the road, and also for that matter on the other side of Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. And what's happened there is that had a situation where lava gets expelled during a volcanic eruption, and it's extremely hot, and then an ice age comes along and it cools down relatively quickly, and the result is those sort of rock formations, those columns of rock that are very hard but at the same time a little brittle as well. snow up there and puddles caught in crevices. There's always cars stopped over here because the scenery really is wonderful. We've just left Wyoming and we've just entered the state of Montana. And whenever you enter Montana, you know that you're very close to a park entry, to one of the park gates. In this case, of course, the northeast entrance, which is just ahead of us. Those mountains that you see off in the background are outside the park. This stretch of road is the longest of our virtual Yellowstone tours. It's 29 miles long, so what's that, about 45, 46 kilometers probably. And where we see the speed limit decrease, we're coming to the northeast entrance. was the section of road between Tower and the northeast entrance. Ahead of us is the northeast entrance. Thank you so much for joining me on another one of our virtual Yellowstone tours. If you enjoy this virtual Yellowstone tour series, please consider giving us a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel. Otherwise, see you in Yellowstone.